My mom texted me at 6 a.m. on my honeymoon, demanding I fly home to babysit teenagers, so I let her dig her own grave while I toured Scottish castles and drank whiskey with my wife. The text came in at 6:23 in the morning. I know the exact time because I screenshotted it later. I've looked at that screenshot probably 100 times since then, not out of anger, but because I still can't fully believe it happened. I was standing in a customs line at Heathrow Airport. My wife Clara was beside me, her carry-on draped over one arm, a paper cup of terrible terminal coffee in the other hand. We'd been married for exactly 19 hours. 19 hours. We hadn't even slept yet. My phone buzzed. Then again. I looked down. Emergency family meeting. 3 words. That's all the first one said. No context. No explanation. Just that emergency family meeting. Like I was being summoned to a conference room instead of standing in an international airport on the first morning of my honeymoon. Clara leaned over and read it before I could say anything. I watched her face change. The tired but happy expression she'd been wearing since we left the reception. The loose, comfortable joy of a woman who had just married someone she loves and was finally getting to exhale, tightened, not into anger, into something harder, something cold and careful. She'd seen my mother operate before. She knew what those 3 words meant before the follow-up texts even arrived. They arrived immediately. Your sister broke her leg. She's in surgery right now. This is serious. Where are you? We need you home now. I read them in order, slowly, the customs line moving around me. The words didn't make sense at first. Not because I didn't understand them, but because my brain genuinely refused to process what my mother was trying to pull. Mackenzie, my youngest sister, 18 years old, had broken her leg. That was real, and I felt it. A lurch of genuine worry. But the demand attached to it, the logic she was using to justify that demand, was so breathtaking in its entitlement that it took me a full 30 seconds to put it together. She wanted me to fly home from London on my honeymoon to babysit. That was the whole ask. Not, we need you. You're the only one who can help Mackenzie through something a surgeon couldn't handle. Not, there's some true emergency that only my presence could resolve. My mother needed someone to watch the house while she and my father dealt with the hospital. And the person she called at 6:23 in the morning while I was clearing customs at Heathrow on day 1 of a trip we'd been planning for 8 months was me. I called her. She picked up on the first ring. Finally, she said. No hello. No acknowledgement that I had been on a plane for 8 hours, that I was standing in a foreign country, that I was a married adult on the first morning of my marriage. Just finally, like I was late. Mom, I said. Is Mackenzie okay? She sighed. Long. Theatrical. I'd heard that sigh 10,000 times. It was the sigh that preceded whatever she actually wanted to say. The sigh that was designed to communicate how deeply I was already disappointing her just by asking questions instead of complying. She's in surgery, my mother said. I already told you that. What I need is for you to come home. There's nobody to watch the kids while we're at the hospital. I stood there in that customs hall, gray floors, fluorescent lights, 100 strangers shuffling forward around me, and I said very carefully, Mom, Clara and I are in London. We fly to Edinburgh in 4 hours. We're on our honeymoon. I know where you are, Alex. Then you know I can't just fly home. Another sigh. This one's shorter, sharper. This is a family emergency. I would think family would come first. I told her I'd call back. I hung up. Clara was still watching me. She didn't say anything yet. She just put her hand on my arm and left it there, warm and steady. I stood there for a moment and thought about the last 30 years of my life, because that's what it took to understand why this phone call felt somehow completely inevitable. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. That fact alone doesn't explain anything. Plenty of oldest children grow up in healthy families where birth order is a footnote, not a job description. I wasn't one of those kids. My parents had me when they were 22. They were young and underprepared, and I think genuinely surprised to discover that raising children required sustained, consistent effort rather than periodic presence. They loved us. I've never doubted that exactly. But love without follow-through is just a feeling. It doesn't pack lunches. It doesn't check homework. It doesn't get up in the night when the baby cries. I did. By the time I was 9, I was making dinner 3 or 4 nights a week. Not helping, making. My mother would leave a note on the counter, chicken in the fridge, rice in the cabinet, and I'd figure out the rest. I didn't mind at first. Kids adapt. Kids normalize whatever their world looks like. I thought this was just what oldest kids did. By 12, I was doing the grocery shopping. My mother would leave cash in an envelope on the kitchen table, usually $60 or $80, sometimes less, and I'd walk to the Safeway 2 blocks away and buy whatever I could make stretch for a week. I learned to read unit prices. I learned which store brand items tasted the same as name brand and which ones didn't. I became, at 12 years old, functionally competent in ways that my parents never bothered to become. Mackenzie was born when I was 13, then the twins, Jake and Ryan, when I was 15. My sister Bree came 2 years after that. By the time I was 17, I had 4 siblings under the age of 5, and a mother who worked part-time and a father who worked long hours and then came home and checked out completely. I changed diapers. I read bedtime stories. I helped with homework. I attended school plays and soccer games when my parents couldn't make it, which was often. My parents called it being mature. They told other parents about me at dinner parties. Alex is is so responsible, my mother would say, beaming. I don't know what we'd do without him. I know now what that actually was. It had a name. Dr. Anne Griffiths would give me that name later, in a hotel room in Edinburgh, and hearing it would feel like something cracking open inside me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. There was a specific moment, maybe 6 years ago. I was 24, just out of college, working my first real job at a project management firm in Portland, when I realized the dynamic had never been going to change on its own. I'd driven home for Thanksgiving, not because I wanted to exactly, but because I felt the pull of it, that deep, grooved obligation. I arrived on Wednesday afternoon to find the house in chaos, dishes everywhere, Bree crying in her room, the twins fighting over something in the living room, and my mother sitting at the kitchen table scrolling her phone while a pot of something boiled over on the stove. She looked up when I walked in. Her face did the thing it always did when I arrived, relaxed, visibly, like a muscle unclenching, like she'd been holding her breath until I got there. "Oh, good," she said. "Can you deal with dinner? I'm exhausted." I dealt with dinner. I always did. That was the foreshadowing. Every holiday, every school break, every crisis that arose in the years that followed, I was the one who got the call. When my father had a minor health scare in 2021, I drove 4 hours in the middle of the night. When the twins got into a fight at school that required a parent conference, I attended it because my mother said she was too anxious. When Bree went through a rough patch at 16 and needed someone to talk to, she called me, not them. I met Clara at a friend's wedding in June of 2022. She was the maid of honor. I was the best man. We were seated next to each other at the rehearsal dinner and talked until the venue started stacking chairs around us. She was a physical therapist from Seattle, careful and warm and direct in a way that I found almost startling. She said what she meant, every time, without apology. She'd grown up in a functional family and recognized immediately, she told me later, that mine was not. We dated for 2 years. I proposed in March of 2024 at a restaurant in the Pearl District in Portland, at a table by the window with snow coming down outside. She said yes before I finished the sentence. We started planning the honeymoon immediately. Scotland was Clara's dream. She'd wanted to go since she was a kid. Something about a book she'd read in middle school about a girl who ran away to the Highlands. We booked 2 weeks. Edinburgh, the Highlands, Loch Lomond, Skye, a whiskey distillery tour that Clara had been researching for months. Total cost, $11,300. Flights, hotels, experiences, everything. I told my parents in January, 7 months before the wedding. I sat down with my mother specifically and told her, "We leave August 14th. We return August 28th. I will not be available during those 2 weeks." I said it gently, but clearly. I said it more than once. "That's nice, honey," she said, the same way she'd say it about a new haircut. I should have recognized that response for what it was, a non-acknowledgement, a way of hearing something without actually registering it. She hadn't taken the information in. She'd just smiled and nodded and gone back to whatever she was doing, because somewhere in her mind, my unavailability had never actually been a real possibility she needed to plan around, because I had never in 30 years been truly unavailable. The messages didn't stop after that first call. They multiplied. By the time Clara and I were through customs and seated in the Heathrow departure terminal, my phone had received 26 messages. I know because I counted them. I sat in a plastic chair with a $4 bottle of water and read every single one in order, while Clara sat beside me and did not tell me what to do. That's one of the things I love most about her. She gives me room to figure things out without pushing me toward her preferred conclusion. My mother, my father, which was unusual, he almost never got involved directly, 3 of my aunts, 2 cousins I hadn't spoken to in over a year, all of them with the same message, the same tone, the same vocabulary of obligation and guilt, a coordinated effort, a campaign. You need to be here for your family. This is what family means. I can't believe you'd choose a vacation over your own sister. Your parents have given you everything. This is how you repay them? Mackenzie is scared and she needs her big brother. I called Mackenzie directly. She answered on the 3rd ring, groggy and slow, clearly on pain medication. I asked her how she was. She said it hurt, but the surgery had gone well. Clean break, tibia, just below the knee. The doctor expected full recovery within 8 weeks. She'd be in a cast. She'd need to be careful, but she was going to be fine. "I'm really confused," she said, "about why Mom is telling everyone you need to come home. I told her you were on your honeymoon. She wants me to come back to watch the kids while you're in the hospital." Silence on the other end. Then, "Jake and Ryan are 19, Alex, and Bree is 17. I don't think they really need—" "I know. Are you coming home?" "No," I said. "I'm not." She was quiet for a moment. "Good. Tell Clara I said congrats." I called my mother back. This was the call I had been dreading, the one I knew was coming, the one I'd been trying to prepare myself for without quite being able to. "We're not coming home," I said. "Mackenzie is okay. The kids don't need supervision. Clara and I are going to Edinburgh." The silence that followed was different from any silence I'd heard from her before. It was loaded, pressurized. "If you don't come home," my mother said finally, her voice very quiet and very controlled, "don't bother coming back to this family at all. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you've become, what kind of son, what kind of brother." I sat with that for a moment, felt the old weight of it, the specific gravity of her disapproval, the thing that had steered my entire life for 30 years. Then I said, "I love you, Mom. I'll talk to you when we get home." and I hung up. Clara was watching me from across the small table between our seats. She just threatened to disown you, Clara said slowly, working through it, for not canceling our honeymoon to babysit teenagers. Yeah, okay, Clara said. She picked up her coffee. Okay, we're going to Scotland. We got on the plane. The messages didn't stop in Edinburgh. That was the thing I hadn't fully anticipated. I had imagined that once the plane was in the air and the decision was made, the pressure would ease, that my mother would accept the reality of my absence and find another way. She did not. The campaign intensified. My aunts sent voice messages. My father sent a 3-paragraph email, measured and lawyerly, explaining in careful language that my behavior was damaging the family in ways I might not be able to repair. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years materialized in my message requests with the same talking points, slightly reworded. My mother's friend Linda, a woman I'd known since childhood, who'd attended the wedding 6 days earlier and hugged me and told me how proud she was, sent me a text that said simply, "I thought I knew you better than this." By our third morning in Edinburgh, I had stopped answering. Not out of anger, or not only out of anger, out of something more pragmatic. Every response I gave generated 5 more messages. Every acknowledgement was treated as an opening. The only thing that slowed the flood was silence, but the silence had costs of its own. I was present in body and somewhere else in mind. We'd walk through the Royal Mile, those gorgeous compressed stone streets with their smell of rain and old granite, and I'd be half there, half in the group chat where my cousin was telling me I was going to regret this. We visited Edinburgh Castle on the second day, stood on the esplanade and looked out over the city spread below us in the September morning light, and I spent 20 minutes of it hunched over my phone while Clara read the placard about Mary Queen of Scots. She didn't say anything that day, or the next. She waited. On the 4th day, she took the phone out of my hands. We were in the hotel room, a beautiful old converted Georgian townhouse on Queen Street, the kind of room with high ceilings and sash windows and a brass-framed bed, and I was lying on my back reading the latest escalation from my father while Clara was brushing her hair at the vanity. She walked over, looked at what I was reading, and took the phone from my hands without asking. "They're ruining our honeymoon," she said, not accusatory, just stating a fact. "We need help, real help, from someone who knows what this is." She was right. I knew she was right. I'd known for a long time that my relationship with my family wasn't normal, but I'd never put a framework around it, never sat down with anyone who could explain the machinery of it. Clara had already found someone. Her name was Dr. Anne Griffiths. She was based in Edinburgh, as it happened, a therapist with 16 years of practice specializing in toxic family systems and complex family trauma. Her office was on Dundas Street. She offered video sessions when clients weren't local. Clara had sent an inquiry the night before without telling me. We did the session on a Thursday morning, sitting together in that Georgian hotel room, my laptop on the bed between us. Dr. Griffiths was in her late 50s, composed and precise, with the particular quality of someone who has heard a great many difficult things without being undone by any of them. I told her everything: the childhood, the grocery envelopes, the dinners, the school plays, Mackenzie's leg, the 26 messages, the threat. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "What your parents did to you as a child has a name," she said. "It's called parentification. The child is assigned the emotional or practical responsibilities of a parent. It's a form of abuse, not dramatic, not always visible, but real and sustained. You were used." I sat with that word for a long moment. Used. "The coordinated messaging from extended family members," she continued, "is a pattern called flying monkeys. It's common in narcissistic family systems. The central figure, in this case your mother, recruits others to act as enforcers of her will. It's not organic, it's deliberate. She's managing her image with the extended family while applying pressure to you." "What do I do?" I asked. "You're already doing it," she said. "You held a boundary. Now you hold it. Don't negotiate. Don't justify. Don't explain yourself repeatedly. Explanation is just another form of engagement. Stay in Scotland. Have your honeymoon. And when you return, consider whether the relationship, as currently structured, is one you can sustain." We talked for 90 minutes. Clara held my hand the entire time. After the session, we walked down to the Water of Leith, a narrow river that winds through Edinburgh's new town, tree-lined and quiet, and I cried for the first time in years. Not from pain exactly, from something more complicated. The grief of understanding clearly, maybe for the first time, what had been done to me, and what I'd allowed to continue. We walked for 2 hours. Then we went back to the hotel and ordered room service and ate it in bed, and Clara told me about the whiskey distillery tour she'd booked for Friday, and I let myself want it. I let myself actually want to be there. Then, on September 1st, 6 days into the trip, my mother sent a text that made me genuinely cold. "Since you've abandoned your responsibilities, we're filing a formal complaint with Adult Protective Services. The kids are being neglected because you're not here. Enjoy Scotland while you can." I read it twice. Then I read it to Clara. She was quiet for a moment. "She just threatened to file a government complaint against you," Clara said, "for not babysitting adults, apparently." "Can she do that?" "I don't think it works the way she thinks it works," I said. "But yeah, she can file the report. Someone has to respond to it." We sat with it for most of the morning. I talked to a family attorney friend by text, a college friend named Derek who practiced in Oregon, and he told me the same thing I'd suspected. An APS complaint requires there's evidence of actual neglect of a dependent adult. 19-year-old twins and a 17-year-old did not qualify. The complaint would likely be reviewed and dismissed, but it would be in a file somewhere, and it was a signal, a deliberate escalation. My mother wasn't just angry. She was trying to use systems against me. I made a decision. I stopped responding to her messages entirely. Not a dramatic announcement, not a final statement, just silence. If she sent a text, it sat unread. If she called, it went to voicemail. We went to the whiskey distillery on Friday. It was a small operation outside of Edinburgh, in a renovated stone building that smelled of peat smoke and wood aging, and something sweet underneath. The tour guide was a compact, bearded man named Graham, who spoke about whiskey with the fervor of someone describing a religion. Clara asked excellent questions. I tasted 5 different expressions, and bought a bottle of the 12-year single malt to take home. At one point, I stood in the parking lot outside the distillery, phone in hand, looking across a field of heather toward the low hills in the distance. The sky was doing the thing Scottish skies do in September, moving constantly, light shifting, patches of blue appearing and disappearing between fast-moving clouds. It was extraordinarily beautiful. My phone rang. Not my mother. Not a number I recognized. I answered. Mr. Brennan, my name is Troy Harmon. I'm a caseworker with the Oregon Department of Human Services, Child Protective Services Division. I'm calling because a report has been filed involving minors at your parents' residence, and your name was listed as the primary caregiver. I felt something shift in my chest. Not fear. Something closer to recognition. Someone reported, Troy continued carefully, that you had abandoned your care responsibilities for 3 minor siblings. One of those siblings is 17, I said. The others are 19. They're adults. Yes, sir. I'm aware the filing contains some inconsistencies. That's part of why I'm calling directly rather than simply opening a case. I'd like to understand the situation from your perspective. I told him everything. The parentification, 30 years of it, my age when it started, the grocery envelopes, the school plays, the way my parents had structured my entire childhood around my willingness to do their job, the wedding, the honeymoon, the texts at 6:23 in the morning, the 26 messages, the flying monkeys, the APS threat, all of it, as calmly and chronologically as I could manage, standing in a Scottish distillery parking lot with a whiskey glass still in my hand. Troy went quiet for a long moment. Mr. Brennan, he said finally, I want to be careful about what I tell you, because this is an active matter. But I'll say this. In the process of filing this report, your mother made several statements about the household and your role in it that are raising concerns for our office. Not about you, about the current caregiving situation in the home. I said, she gave you evidence against herself. He didn't confirm it directly, but he didn't deny it either. We'll be conducting a home visit, he said. I'd encourage you to enjoy the rest of your trip. We'll be in touch. I stood in the parking lot for another minute after he hung up. Then I went back inside, found Clara at the tasting bar, and told her everything. She looked at me for a long moment. She called CPS on you, Clara said, and accidentally called CPS on herself. Apparently, Clara picked up her whiskey glass. To Scotland, she said. To Scotland, I said. We clinked glasses. The home visit happened on a Thursday morning. I know the details because Troy called me afterward, and because Bree called me the same evening, shaking from what I could tell, but not distressed. Relieved, maybe. Like something that had needed to happen had finally happened. Troy and a colleague arrived at 10:15 a.m. Both my parents were still asleep. The house was, according to the report I was later given access to, in significant disarray. Dishes from multiple days. Laundry piled in the hallway. A bathroom that hadn't been cleaned in a visible while. Bree had missed 3 days of school without explanation or excuse from a parent. The investigators spoke to each child separately. Jake, Ryan, Bree, all 3, independently, without coordination, said the same essential thing. It was always Alex. He ran the household. He made the food. He handled the appointments and the school stuff and the money when things got tight. We don't know how to do any of this without him. Not because I'd coached them. Not because they were trying to protect me. Because it was simply the truth, unvarnished and shared. 3 different people in 3 different rooms telling 3 different investigators the same story. My mother had filed a report to punish me, to force a system to compel me back into the role I'd vacated. And in doing so, she had handed CPS a clear and documented picture of everything I'd been saying for years. The result, a parenting capacity assessment, both parents, mandatory counseling, home monitoring visits scheduled for the next 90 days, a formal case file. I was standing near Loch Ness when Troy called with the results. We'd done the Highlands Loop, Pitlochry, Inverness, a long, slow drive along the A82 with the loch stretching out gray and still on one side, and pine forest climbing the hills on the other. We'd stopped at a small distillery near Drumnadrochit, and I was in the parking lot again with another glass of something peaty and smoky and extraordinarily good. Troy told me the outcome in careful, neutral language. Then he said, I want to be clear, Mr. Brennan, that you are not the subject of any finding. The concerns identified are entirely with the current household. You are free to live your life. I thanked him. I hung up. I stood there for a long moment looking at the loch. Free to live your life. Clara appeared beside me. She'd been inside talking to the distillery owner. She looked at my face and understood immediately that something had happened. I told her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she put her arm through mine and leaned leaned against me and looked out at the water. She tried to use the government to drag you back, Clara said, and the government opened a case on her instead. Yeah, is that satisfying? I thought about it honestly. A little, I said. Mostly I just feel tired. We stood there for a while. The loch was very still. A pair of birds I didn't know the name of crossed the water low, almost touching the surface. I thought about my mother, not the woman on the phone at 6:23 a.m., all command and cold anger. The other one, the one from earlier memories, a memory I rarely let myself access, of her sitting on the edge of my bed when I was 7 or 8, reading to me, her voice warm and unhurried, before the siblings arrived one after another and everything redistributed, before I became useful to her in ways that a child should never be useful to a parent. I thought about who she might have been if she'd had more support, more resources, a different set of choices. And then I let that go, because the woman she might have been didn't undo what the woman she was had done. We flew back to Portland on August 28th, as planned, 2 full weeks. Every night in those hotel beds, every castle, every loch, every dram of whiskey, all of it intact. The airport felt surreal, American accents, flat Midwestern light through the terminal windows, my own city again after 2 weeks, and everything in it subtly rearranged by what had happened while I was gone. Jake called from a number I didn't recognize as we were waiting for our luggage. Burner phone, he said immediately. Mom took mine. She took your phone? When she found out I'd talked to the CPS people honestly. She said I'd betrayed the family. A pause. Alex, she's telling everyone you called CPS on them, that you set this up from Scotland, that you did it on purpose to destroy the family. I know, I said. I didn't. I know you didn't. So does Bree. Ryan's not sure. Mom got to him. Another pause. There's something else. Bree told the investigator something. Something she'd never told anyone. I waited. About when she was 12, Jake said.
She told them that when you left for college, she kind of fell apart. Not because she missed you exactly, because there was suddenly nobody doing the things you did. Mom didn't pick up the slack. She just stopped. And Bree said she went about 3 months eating mostly cereal and frozen stuff because nobody cooked. And she didn't tell anyone because she didn't know she was allowed to. I sat down on a luggage carousel that wasn't moving yet. Clara looked over at me.
She was 12, I said. Yeah, I stayed quiet for a moment. Is she okay now? She's talking to one of the CPS counselors. She says it helps. We arranged to meet for coffee the following week, Jake and Bree, at a place in Northeast Portland they liked. Not a family summit, not a confrontation, just a cup of coffee with 2 of my siblings who had decided to be honest about what had happened to us all. My father called 3 days after we got back. I answered. I don't know why. Maybe because I'd rehearsed it enough in my head that the actual call felt less dangerous than the anticipated one. Your mother is devastated, he said. I know she is, I said. This CPS thing, it's not nothing, Alex. These counselors, the home visits. Dad, I didn't file the report. She did. Silence. She was trying to scare you into coming home. I know that too. She didn't anticipate, she didn't think I'd be taken seriously, I said, because I never have been before. Because when I said for 30 years that I was doing work that should have been yours, nobody took that seriously either. And now someone did. My father didn't respond for a long time. I didn't know it was that bad for you, he said finally. I want you to know that. I wasn't paying enough attention, and that's on me. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't a complete accounting, but it was the most honest thing he'd said to me in years, and I held it carefully, the way you hold something fragile. I appreciate that, I said. I really do. And when you and Mom are done with the counseling, when you've both done some real work on this, I want to have a real conversation about the family, about what comes next. But I'm not doing it now, and I'm not doing it under pressure. He said he understood. I don't know if he did. I met with my mother 6 weeks later, not at my parents' house, at a neutral restaurant in Southeast Portland, a quiet Italian place on Division Street where we'd eaten together a few times over the years. She arrived first. She was wearing her good coat, the navy one she kept for occasions she considered important, and she looked smaller than I remembered, older, the lines around her eyes deeper, the performance of control that usually held her face in shape, absent. She had rehearsed something. I could tell by the way she started, a prepared opening, careful, designed to accomplish several things at once, acknowledge partial wrongdoing, attribute the rest to stress and fear, reclaim moral ground by emphasizing how much she loved us all. I let her say it. Then I said, Mom, I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to relitigate 20 years of decisions. I'm here because I love you, and because I think you love me, and because I want us to have something real between us instead of something performed. But that means being honest about what happened, including what happened to me as a kid. She started to say something. I kept going. I was 9 years old when you first left me in charge of dinner. I was 12 when I was doing the grocery shopping. I was 15 when the twins were born, and I effectively became their third parent. I gave you everything I had. I don't regret it exactly. I love my siblings, and I'd do a lot for them, but I was a child, and the things you were asking me to do were not a child's job. Her eyes filled. I didn't stop. When I went to Scotland, I wasn't abandoning you. I was, for the first time in my life, refusing to be available, and you responded by calling APS and recruiting the entire extended family to punish me for it, and I need you to understand that can't happen again, ever. If it happens again, I won't be back. Not for coffee, not for Christmas, not Not at all. She cried, quietly, into a napkin. When she looked up, she said, I didn't know I was hurting you. I don't know if I believe that. I think she knew something was wrong and chose not to examine it because the arrangement was too convenient. But I also think that's different from deliberate cruelty. And in the territory between those two things, not innocent, not monstrous, is where most difficult parents actually live. I believe you didn't mean to, I said, but it still happened. We sat there for a while after that, ate our food, talked about Mackenzie's recovery, which was going well. She was in physical therapy, expected to walk without a cast by late October, talked about Bree, who had started seeing a therapist of her own. The twins were both in community college now, doing fine. We didn't solve anything in that lunch. We didn't reach a moment of cinematic reconciliation, but we talked honestly, for the first time maybe ever, without the usual architecture of performance and obligation holding the whole thing up, and that was something. A different kind of something than I'd expected, but real. Here's where I am now. Clara and I have an apartment in Portland's Irvington neighborhood, an old bungalow we've been renting for 2 years, with a deep front porch and a garden that Clara has been slowly turning into something beautiful. We have a morning routine, coffee before 7, the news, her headed to her clinic by 8, me to my desk by 8:30. On weekends, we hike, we cook, we have people over. We have, in other words, a life. The Scotland photos are on the wall of our hallway. Edinburgh Castle. The Highlands in September morning light, heather going amber at the edges, Loch Ness, flat and grey and enormous, Clara at a whiskey bar in Inverness, laughing at something, me outside a castle whose name I keep meaning to look up, squinting into the sun. I look at them sometimes when I walk past. I look at them and think, we did that, on the schedule we planned, on the trip we chose, in spite of every effort to pull us home. My relationship with my parents is ongoing and complicated. My mother is in therapy, real therapy, 50 minutes a week, a woman she says she likes. My father has started attending some sessions with her. It's progress, slow, uncertain, not linear progress. There are weeks when she calls and we have good conversations, and weeks when I can hear the old patterns starting to resurface, the subtle guilt threading, the framing of her needs as my obligations, and I redirect, clearly and without heat, and sometimes she hears it and sometimes she doesn't. I see my siblings regularly. Jake and I text almost daily. Bree came to dinner last month, sat at our kitchen table, ate Clara's roast chicken, and talked for 3 hours about her life, not the family stuff, just her life, what she wants to study, a boy she's seeing, what she's afraid of and what she's not. She's going to be okay. I think she's going to be more than okay. Mackenzie is fully recovered. She ran a 5K in October, 2 months after the surgery. She sent me a photo of herself at the finish line, cast-free, grinning. I have it on my phone. I look at it sometimes too. Here's what I know now that I didn't know then, or didn't know clearly. Being needed is not the same as being loved. My parents needed me. They needed what I could do for them. That's different from loving who I am, and I confuse the two things for most of my life. The confusion is understandable. It's also costly. I spent 30 years arranging my existence around their requirements and calling it family loyalty. The thing about a boundary is that it only tells you who someone really is when it's tested. Anyone can respect a limit that never costs them anything. The measure is what they do when respecting the limit means actually going without something they want. My mother, when tested, called government agencies and mobilized family members to pressure me back into service. That's information. I hold it clearly now, without bitterness, as information. And we went to Scotland. We walked through Edinburgh's old town in the September rain. We ate haggis and found we liked it more than expected. We stood on a hillside above a loch in the early morning and watched the mist come off the water. Clara held my hand on a ferry crossing somewhere near Skye. We drank very good whiskey in the parking lot of a distillery near Loch Ness while my mother's case file was being opened 2 continents away. We were married 19 hours when the first text came in. We were married 38 years from now if we're lucky, and every one of those years begins here, in the choice we made in that Heathrow Customs Hall to keep walking forward. Something real was lost in all of this. I don't pretend otherwise. The family I spent my childhood imagining I was building, a reciprocal thing, warm and sustained and mutual, doesn't exist. Maybe it never did. And there's grief in that. Quiet, persistent grief that shows up in odd moments, not dramatically, just as an ache. But here's what I also know. Scotland was worth every text, every voicemail, every cousin I haven't heard from since, every flying monkey my mother dispatched, and every empty threat she made, worth every bit of it. We earned those whiskey glasses, and we drank them.